It's the Crisco Kid Block Party.
Our next guest, for decades, he's been the voice or the face of shocking reveals, unforgettable moments, and he truly helped define pop culture TV. But now in his eighth decade, yes, eighth decade, congratulations, by the way. He's stepping into a new role, revealing untold stories, revisiting pivotal moments in his career, and telling stories in a whole new way. He's the host of the new podcast, On Par with Maury Povich. Ladies and gentlemen, the legend, Maury Povich.
Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you, Crisco. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm telling you, I'm so excited to be here with you today. You know, I didn't get to make it on your show, which I think
Really?
that was a good thing. That was a good thing. We didn't have to do any DNA paternity test. So I said, well, then if I wasn't on his show, then he's got to come on mine and talk about his new podcast. Welcome, Mr. Povich. How are you doing this morning?
Fine. Crisco, call me Maury, please.
All right.
So, I'm doing this podcast. It's, I can you imagine, as old as I am, I feel like a rookie. It's like the Godfather 3 movie, you know, just when I thought I was out, they dragged me back in. And a lot of people have had an idea about this. And I said, well, not, why not? The reason I'm doing it more than anything else is I get a chance to talk about myself. I mean, on the show, you know, it was all about our guests and their stories and the burdens that they were on. And now I can interview all these great people and get into their stories. And because I'm a storyteller, that's what I am at heart. But because of their stories, it will jigger some stuff in my life and I can talk about them. And it goes back to my roots. Before I ever did the talk show, I had 30 years of journalism in terms of TV work, and I covered a lot of big events. And so therefore, I'm going back to that aspect of my life.
Yeah, which, you know, looking back on your career, going from A Current Affair, like I mentioned earlier, and then watching that journalistic take, and people are like, wait, what's Current Affair? Think of TMZ before TMZ was around, right?
Right,
Maury
exactly.
was that guy. You were that guy, right?
Yeah, there wouldn't have been a TMZ without A Current Affair and Hard Copy and Inside Edition and all those kind of edgy tabloid news shows.
Right. And then so, you know, you heard the quote, and I'm only bringing this up because you mentioned that you were doing journalistic reporting 30 years before the Maury Show picked up and kicked off and took over America. Sometimes people say, oh, this person's an overnight success, but they don't understand that preparation of who you became to how you became who you are. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, I don't think the show would have been successful. I know I wouldn't have been successful without those 30 years of experience.
Right.
I mean, when you think this is how old I am. Okay. I was at Andrews Air Force Base when Jacqueline Kennedy came off that plane with the coffin of her husband in the back, and she had blood all over her pink suit. That was one of the first big stories I covered. And I covered the Martin Luther King's March on Washington. I covered, of course, the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy and all of Watergate and the fall of the Berlin Wall. I mean, it was, you know, to me, they were the golden days of news.
Right. You know, news, I agree. I think at that time was like the trusted voice, the trusted face, the trusted entity. And we've seen how it's evolved through now. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I really want to talk about your new podcast and how you've taken that experience, wrapped it into something that I think, not to say you didn't want to do the Maury Show, but these are conversations with friends, athletes, other journalists, your wife, the incredible Connie Chung. I mean, you starting off the whole series like that. And by the way, I don't think I'd ever heard you use any type of swear word in my life until like the first couple sentences where you're like, oh, cut the shit. And I was like, wait, what did Maury just say? Hold on, I had to rewind it and say, oh, we're going to get a real podcast here.
First of all, I can do it with my wife. She has the worst potty mouth of anybody. I mean, basically, she used that in her career to be like one of the boys. I mean, she had to be like a boy because, you know, girls were treated differently. Women were treated differently in the news business back then. And so therefore she had to be able to swear like the guys. She had to be able to tell dirty jokes like the guys. And so it's pretty familiar in my house. In fact, yeah, there's not a sentence that goes by without some kind of swear word is going to be used. But the thing is, with On Par, the first episode with my wife, I mean, it's already generated a lot of crap because somehow the producer of the podcast had this bowl, and Connie was going to pick out a question on the bowl, and the question was, when are you the most sexiest to me? And the only thing I could say was on Sundays. And Connie said, oh, never on Sundays. I said, in our house, always on Sundays. It's Sundays with Connie.
Yeah. My
golf buddies call me up to play golf on Sunday. Nope. Sundays with Connie. And so therefore, and Connie's going like this with her lips. That went viral. I mean, it went crazy. Everybody's talking about our sex life on Sundays. And I think it's because she's 78, I'm 86. Guess what? Things happen.
It's still going. There you go. But Sundays, so everybody has that day of the week, or at least they should.
Sure.
Or you just unplug, and it's all about that your significant other.
Exactly.
Time we're spending
that's what we've done for many, many years. We've kind of always provided the Sunday for us to do whatever we do. And I think that, by the way, we've been married over 40 years. I think that everybody, all couples ought to, make sure that you reserve some time for each other.
Yeah. Speaking of power couples, because that's what y'all are, especially in media and in news. What was it like? I'm sure you're familiar with the movie Anchorman and how that love story kind of hit. Was there ever any bantering like that in that movie?
Well, I mean, at one time, particularly with A Current Affair, and when she was working network news, we competed against each other. And so, we had this bargain that we would not go after each other's stories. That if I was working on something, she would not try to barge in and take the interview for herself until she did. And boy, I'm telling you right now, I just went nuts. I said, I thought we had a deal. She says, yeah, but the interview was too big. So, I've been trying to one-up her ever since.
Yeah, it's these stories, I think, that you'll be sharing with all of us.
Sure.
They're going to make the podcast what it is, already off to a great start. So far, what is it that you're truly enjoying about the podcast format versus the television presentation?
Well, here's the thing. On a podcast, as well as I do, you have somebody for much more than the 8 or 9 minutes I would have on the talk show, or the 4 or 5 minutes I would have on A Current Affair, or when I was doing news, the minute and a half you would have doing a story. You have this time to really delve into somebody's life and what they're feeling and what they're doing, and talk about their successes and talk about their failures. It's amazing. What I found out already, it's amazing how many successful people love to talk about their failures, because they say their failures, if there weren't the failures, there would not have been the successes. Right. And so therefore I talked about my own failures in life, and the fact that when I got fired from a news show, and when I got fired from a station, and I figured it out a long time ago about failure and stuff. It's not the act of being fired that's scary. It's if you haven't ever been fired or you haven't ever failed, it's the feeling you will have when you get fired. I thought about that because we don't know. We don't know what the feeling is going to be like. Are we just going to keel over? Is that the end? Because we don't know how we're going to feel. And so when it happened to me many years ago at a particular television station and I got fired, gee whiz, I still have my hands. I still have my feet. I have my health. And so I laid down on a couch, started watching all these newscasts, and convinced myself, I think I'm as good as these people. And so therefore the feeling, I was over the feeling. So it didn't matter to me anymore.
I think that is the advice because I was going to ask you for a piece of advice for whether you're Generation X, you're a millennial, you're
Doesn't
Generation
matter.
D.
Doesn't matter.
Advice,
I'm telling you,
that's it.
failure, the feeling of failure is the worst thought in the world. And if you can get over that, you're on your way.
I had to drop that for you, Maury, one time. I had to drop that for you. Now, we're in season 1 on par with Maury Povich.
Right.
Right. It's going to be a continual, like, hey, we're just going to go until I say I feel like retiring again, because this was kind of a Tom Brady move. You retired and then you came back. I know it's a little different.
Oh, yeah.
Back, and we're glad you're back.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Brady, because one of the reasons that I left the talk show and didn't want to do anything else was because, look, my father was a sports writer for the Washington Post for 75 years. I've been around sports all my life. I've seen these athletes try to hold on, try to hang on forever. And it was sad to see them at the end of their careers. And so therefore, I didn't want that. But now you mentioned Brady, I can use him as the great example about coming out of retirement. I mean, it's great. I love that. And so I'm going to use that as my example of one of the reasons I came back. Right. And we'll do the podcast as long as I feel like doing it. And if I don't feel like doing it anymore, I won't do it. But I'm having so much fun. I've got some great guests coming up. For instance, you know who Gary Vee is? Yes.
Of course, I've been on his show. He's been on mine. Yes, great guest.
So Gary's going to be on my show. He's going to be the next one. We drop a new episode every Monday on YouTube, of course. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, all Spotify, Apple, all the podcast platforms. But I'm going to have Gary Vee. Then I'm going to have Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank. You know, so it's just a myriad. It's just a kaleidoscope of people, different people. This week, I'm having on the great Hall of Fame jockey Lafitte Pinkai, because the Kentucky Derby's coming up this Saturday. And he's got a lot of stories about the Derby and things like that. So I want to be relevant. Yes. I mean, if I'm not relevant, it ain't fun. So that's what I'm doing.
At the same time, I think your place in TV history and pop culture history is solidified, right? I would think this is just for you to have fun. I don't think you're doing this unless you're not having any fun. And I think this is what makes On Par with Maury Povich so special, is because these are guests and these are stories that you want to tell. These are people you want on your show.
Exactly.
And you feel like it's irrelevant or your producers or anybody, I think this is what we want. This is exactly what we want when we're going to a podcast with you.
And I want the people who have full personalities, who have lots to talk about. And by the way, I don't know about you, Crisco, but this is what I think. If I'm doing a successful show, if I'm doing a successful podcast, somewhere along the line, the guest will say, wow, nobody's ever asked me that question. That, to me, if you get that out of the guest, you've done your job.
Yes, thank you. Maury is dropping gems today. He's dropping gems. On Par with Maury Povich. I know it's called On Par, which the logo and everything would indicate you love some golf here. When do you take the time here? Because you retired a little bit and now you're working. So are you an early morning? Are you a midday golfer? What's your deal here?
Actually, I'm a morning golfer.
Okay.
I mean, and quite frankly, I have no excuses. I play enough golf. I'm very fortunate because my wife always says, you join a golf club and then we have to find a house. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, I belonged to a club in Florida, so we had to go down there. And so we rent a little place in Florida. We've lived in Montana for the last 27 years in the summertime. But of course, we live in a mountain, but at the same time, there's a golf club 20 minutes away. Yeah. So, I mean, I make sure there's a golf club around before I search for property.
Yeah. Hey, Maury Povich is here. On Par with Maury Povich. You can stream that. You can watch it on YouTube. I want to touch just real quick on the Maury Povich show, on the Maury show, right?
Of course.
You are not the father. You are the father. Was a lie. I mean, all these iconic phrases. You know, I've asked people in the past, like let's take Shaggy. You know, he has that song, "It Wasn't Me." When I'm in a genre, it wasn't me. And I said, Shaggy, do you ever get tired of people coming up to you and say, hey, Shaggy, was it you or is it still not you? And he's like, no, because when they stop asking me that, that's when I know I have a problem. Do you ever get
Right.
tired of people
No.
saying you are the father?
No, not at all. I mean, you know, look, I live in New York City, okay? I mean, you're walking down the street and guys are going, hey, Moore, hey, I'm not the father, Moore. I'm not the father. You know let me tell you how this all happened. The first time we did the paternity test theme, and I read all about the guests and everything else, and the producer of that particular show is briefing me before we do the show, and she's saying this, and I said, okay, I've got it, and she says the result, and I said, I don't want to know the result. I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything more than my guests know, my live audience knows, my audience at home. I don't want, because if I know something more than they do, then I'll skew the questions. I don't want to know anything more than they know. So the inflection of you are the father, you are not the father, is because I'm as surprised as anybody. And it was a natural, real, honest remark.
That's what made, I think, the show
sure.
what it was, because I'm glad you told me that. I don't like to know, and I feel the same thing. If there's some type of result or any, I don't want to know.
Don't want it, right?
We think that genuine reaction is what people want.
Sure. You know, that's the way I've always thought about myself in every aspect of the business. I mean, be as transparent and as honest as you can. And so that's what I feel.
Well, talking about those reveals, is there a funniest one that you still remember to this day, or one of the saddest or unfortunate ones? Because sometimes I've seen there are some great stories. You're like, oh man, what a good guy, or what a good lady, or
right.
Man, I'm so sorry that didn't work out.
So first of all, I'm happy that because the show lasted so long, I was able to bring these families back 20 years later to find out if the father did get involved with the child. And we have many stories in which they did, and of course, some stories in which they didn't. But the lie detector test, the funniest ever, was when a guy was trying to convince his significant other that he was not cheating when he's away for 3 days at a time, because he claimed that he was kidnapped and put in a trunk. I broke out laughing when he said that.
Yeah.
And of course, the woman didn't, she didn't buy that. I didn't buy that. And of course, when the reveal comes out, that he was telling a lie, he was trying to tell me that the lie detector test was wrong. He just still was trying to convince her that he was kidnapped and put in a trunk for 3 days. That was the funniest. And in terms of paternity tests, there was a woman who accusing a guy of being the father of her twins. I open up the result. He's the father of one, but not the other. There you go. Fraternal twins can have two fathers. It's 1,000,000 to 1 shot. I didn't know about it. That's what the doctors say. If the woman is very active at a certain period of the month, it can happen. And it happened twice on my show.
So this was not only paternity testing, this was an actual science class.
Exactly.
That's what that was as well on that episode. Hey, I want to close out with just a couple of quick questions here.
Sure.
These are kind of fun because I want to tap into your journalistic roots here, your investigative reporting, and just kind of see where you're at with some of these. All right. So, Maury, do you think aliens exist?
I think it's possible. Yes. Yeah. I haven't closed the book on it. No. And by the way, we keep seeing stories all the time of some far planet with some kind of life, with some kind of, water or some kind of this. And yeah, I haven't closed the book on
that. I'm right there with you. A person you never got to interview but wish you did.
There were lots. The problem is most of them are dead, so I'll never get a chance. Right. The one person I would like to interview, believe it, is an old acquaintance of mine, George W. Bush, the 43rd president of the United States, because I think he is just handled himself so well since his presidency, and I'd just like to talk to him about that and why he chose the kind of life he did after the presidency.
As far as painting and doing the
Yeah, yeah, and not getting involved in politics,
Right.
and staying away.
Yeah.
And I loved the fact that he didn't do that.
Yeah,
And I think that's given him a better reputation than he had before.
yeah. It's funny you bring him up because I was just watching the clip where he's dodging the shoes and everything. I know
Yeah.
you remember that
Yeah.
moment right there.
Oh yeah, he and I had a lot of fun. We were old golf buddies, and I remember one time I went to the White House. He always had me to go every year that of his presidency. We had lunch together, and he was there one year, and he was saying, Poe, we had nicknames for everything. He says, Poe, I'm flipping around the thing, and I watch that show. How do you do that show with a straight face? And I looked at him and I said, Mr. President, think of all the things you have to do every day with a straight face. And he said, touche.
There you go. There you go. Where do you get your news? Because you've been a part of the news for so long, but now where do you go for it?
I read all the stuff now, mostly online. Connie still reads it. She wants the print paper in front of her. I'm not that way, but I have all these sites that I go to, plus the various newspapers. I'll go to Politico. I'll go to Axios. I'll go to all these news sites to get my news, and I think they do a pretty good job. The problem is that, for the most part, it's very difficult to get news that's unfiltered. Everybody seems to have a slant, and I'm just not into that. And I'm glad I'm not in the business because of that. I'm glad I'm in the podcast business and not the news business.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, you can have your opinion because, sometimes opinion base is coming out as news. And I think that's where that line is so blurred that everyone doesn't know exactly what is what anymore.
Right.
Last question here.
Sure.
Sure. Why and what motivates you at this level of career and level of success? Why do you keep going?
I think I think, believe it or not, I've always wanted to test myself. And I think this is just another test. But at the same time, if it wasn't fun, if I wasn't in the atmosphere of fun, I wouldn't do it. I don't have to. I mean, I think about it. I'm 86 years old. I don't need this shit.
Exactly. He don't need it, but he loves it. He wants to do it. Maury Povich stream. You can watch On Par with Maury Povich everywhere. Subscribe to it. And by the way, I was your 667th subscriber. I did not want to leave you on 666. So you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Crisco. Thank you.
Have a great one, Maury. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you. Okay.